It's Real Talk, Episode 16, Wrestling Movies. See which classic scores highest today. From WrestleNomics, podcaster and former wrestler Brandon Thurston reviews Beyond the Mat. Lila the Silver Screen Sugar Glider swoops in once again to score the Iron Claw. And Cheap Heat's own stat guy Greg Hyde of the Hyde Law Firm is here to grade The Wrestler. Now please leave a nice comment or 5-star review and subscribe or...
Real Talk is powered by Real Digital. If you work for a brand or agency producing content, keep it real by setting up a consultation at www.realdigital.media to see how your next campaign can come in ahead of schedule and under budget.
I don't know why I like it, but I do. If Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler is the cinematic equivalent of getting a character over, it's my opinion that 2000's Beyond the Mat is a 1 hour and 42-minute cinematic promo, but is the movie a good guy or a heel? As a young lion who grew up in the 90s, wrestling was everywhere, but rarely did I get a glimpse behind the curtain, and rarer still were the peaks provided by someone outside the promotion. When I was young, I absorbed Beyond the Mat as gospel. But as an adult, I understand that most of the film is as much of a work as a wrestling match itself, because nearly all the narratives contained within the movie only exist inside it, and the anecdotes that extend beyond the credits feel like a warning instead of a celebration. From Terry Funk and Jake Roberts to Mick Foley and Chyna, Beyond the Mat showcases top stars and legends of the industry, as well as a full range of promoters from Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman to the late APW founder Roland Alexander. But it's the children and wives of the performers that tragically steal the show. I'm beyond lucky to be joined for this review by the foremost authority of the business of the medium of professional wrestling, WrestleNomics' own, and a man who has himself stepped between the ropes many times, Mr. Brandon Thurston. Welcome to Real Talk. Hold, please. Welcome to Real Talk. Hold, please. Welcome to... All right, I'll kill this bit before I get the go-away heat.
It was a long journey to get here. I seldom leave Buffalo, New York, but I did make an exception. Thanks for having me.
We here at Real Talk are big fans of WrestleNomic and all the work you've been doing for many, many years now. So it means the world that you did make the trip, and we hope that it's worth it because we're talking today about a movie I would assume you're probably pretty familiar with, and I might as well just ask right out of the gate, when's the first time you saw Beyond the Mat?
I don't think I saw it in theaters, but as soon as it hit Blockbuster, if you remember what that is, I probably saw it by then. I remember that the semi-controversy around it in that Vince didn't want any ads for it to air during Raw or something like that, and I think he got that to happen. This is, I would say, next to Hitman Hart Wrestling the Shadows, this is probably the most famous wrestling documentary, I would say.
I think definitely, especially of the period. I mean, there's more modern wrestling, like ESPN 30 for 30 style things that are more based on performers, but even those I don't think really hold a candle in terms of nobody's walking away from the Andre the Giant doc with like half a dozen quotes. I feel like this movie really comes with just all sorts of things that it's almost, as wrestling fans, Beyond the Mat is kind of like a handshake. Like you can quote certain things, and I know in college, you knew someone was a good dude if you could say something like, because I'm just not booked, Terry, because I'm just not booked. And if they started laughing, you were like, all right, I got a friend here.
I was watching it last night. So like I spent almost 20 years, 17 years or so as an indie wrestler. It was, I kept saying that like this movie is like the Bible. It's like there's so many things that are quotable or that pertain to different situations that you ended up in as an indie wrestler. And I remember like my indie wrestler friends, like, as you're saying here, like constantly quoting it, and I'm not booked. I'm not booked. I don't do any tricks. And even like Jake Roberts, like looking down at his jacket and be like, "Yep, is that chocolate?" It's like my friends was, if you spent an hour with them, you might hear at least one Beyond the Mat reference. But yeah, it's just really informative to the whole continuum of wrestling, from Roland Alexander telling guys not to avoid the Jack in the Box, and the back and forth that they do in this film between what Roland Alexander is saying about pay, and it's really applicable, I think, to the whole gambit of my wrestling experience.
You have, like you just said, you had this 17-year long career. When you watch Beyond the Mat now, I'm assuming you very much see it through a different lens than you would have watched it in 2099. I think a lot of the people in it are kind of working us, so to speak, and I think that the film is aware of that at different moments. Whereas, again, when I'm a teenager, I don't know that at all. I'm just absorbing this like any other documentary. Has your experience evolved at all watching it over the years similarly, or
What do you think is working you, especially in this?
I would just submit the general like presentation of it. I think Vince in particular, a lot of times, like he knows he's on camera, and I don't.
Movies, pal. That's another one. We like movies. He's the most ingenious
Oh,
person to ever speak an English sentence. Like,
he is so smug in this documentary. Like everything he does, the way he says that line and then he takes a drink of water, just swishes it around in his mouth, and you're like, oh my gosh. I think at times Jake Roberts, at times, not all the time, but I definitely think there are moments where he knows he's kind of cutting a promo. I mean, there's even one scene in particular where it's lit differently. It very much feels like the filmmakers and Jake kind of knew, hey, like, let's ham it up a little bit right now. Those are two moments that immediately come to mind. I'm sure as we're talking more will, but yeah.
Jake is super captivating in this. It's documentary, and I think there's always, there's generally in documentaries and maybe in reality TV for that matter, there's always you're leaning into trying to make this as entertaining as possible, and that may stretch the truth a bit. I think like that scene where he's supposedly high on crack, and they're doing like all of these crossfades into Jake like leaning back on the bed or whatever, and having all these ruminations. But I was always kind of surprised that Jake Roberts didn't end up being an actor or something, and maybe his own personal issues got in the way of that too. But he's just such a like there's no more existential character in wrestling than Jake Roberts, and the way he carries himself and the person that he is and the way that he looks and the way that he speaks, he's able to say a lot of things that if I tried to say them as a wrestler, or 99.9% of people in wrestling tried to say them, they would just come off sounding like overly highfalutin and trying to sound like they're smart. But with Jake Roberts, there's a grittiness that he gets permission to do that. And I think like the clip that's in the movie from WrestleMania 6 of his promo before going into like the Ted DiBiase match, and you have that cutaway of where he's, I don't know, wallowing in the muck of avarice.
Yeah.
And you cut away to Gene Okerlund saying, Longfellow couldn't have said it better, which Longfellow is like some famous classic poet. You have to be like gritty and dirty enough to get away with that and for that to be effective. Otherwise, you're just, I don't know, over intellectualizing things, I guess, to the perspective of an audience.
All that said, that was an excellent primer for Brandon Thurston and how in his relationship with Beyond the Mat. I do want to talk first with you about the plot of Beyond the Mat. Again, this has a lot of different characters and things that it touches on. What were some of the standout things to you? Because obviously this is not a traditional film with a beginning, middle, and an end, so to speak. This is more of a kind of just almost like short little anecdotes about different characters who are at different points in their career. I'm curious which of those stories maybe stood out to you the most.
I guess Jake stands out the most. And the story with his daughter, and I feel like we're being worked. Like, did he really only spend 5 minutes like in that bar with his daughter and her friends before he went back to his hotel room? Maybe. The story with Mick Foley is compelling. Like, Mick Foley comes across, I think, as he is one of the more thoughtful, I don't know about normal, but one of the more thoughtful or kind of down to earth people in wrestling, while the dichotomy of him doing so many violent things in wrestling. And the big story I think that they're driving, which ends the film, is showing Foley watch the tape back of Royal Rumble 1999 in his main event with Dwayne Johnson with The Rock, and how he's like hitting the head 10 times with the chair with handcuffs, keeping his wrists back so he can't protect himself. And seeing, he's shown the video, which is, not seen to viewers watching Royal Rumble 99, but is for inclusion in the documentary, of his kids his kids and his wife freaking out watching this. I guess taking all that together with Jake doing crack, I guess I can understand why Vince did not want to promote this film. But it tells stuff that I think is very true of wrestling, and it's very true of the competing interests in wrestling of all these people who want to perform and pop the crowd. And I think Foley does come across a little like out there when he says he kind of justifies the 10 chair shots or whatever as saying, I feel like we really touched people. He's trying to have a performance that really touches people in some way. I don't know. The cost of that seems pretty high at times, including, freaking out, putting his wife and kids in the front row for one thing, and a number of other things that we see in the film, like, Jake's relationship with his father, and not that has to do with, but this is his relationship with his daughter, which had to do with him. He was apart from her because he was on the roads so often.
It feels like Jake's story is very much about that sort of cycle, this indirect generational trauma and abuse. Even though his daughter didn't become a professional wrestler herself, she's very much sort of feeling the same sort of brunt that Jake did as a kid, which got him into it.
Yeah, Terry Funk, and
of course.
I think there's a story there at the end of him. Okay, he's done the retirement match with Brett, and he's just sort of slowly climbing up the stairs. I guess there is a message of, like, the people in this business really do cost themselves a lot, either physically or in other ways.
I can understand why Vince wouldn't want his audience seeing trailers for this and wanting to go see it, because it is a very accurate portrait, especially of the business at the time. And it's not, unfortunately, flattering. As a kid, I mean, it definitely got me really excited, and whatever part of me wanted to be a pro wrestler, I wanted to be a pro wrestler way more after watching this. After my mom watched this, she was very much like, yeah, I don't think this is the right thing to do. It's interesting because the first pay-per-view match I ever watched was Royal Rumble 99, and I watched it with my mom. And so that match had a huge impact in our house and was a match that really stayed with me. And so when I saw this, documentary a year or so later, it was really interesting to watch that come full circle, because I had no idea that his kids were in the crowd, obviously having way more extreme of a reaction than I was. I got to kind of put you on the spot here, because there is a moment early in the film when the voiceover tells us that the WWF at the time is worth almost $1 billion. I'm curious, Brandon Thurston, I feel like you might know, in 2025, any chance you know roughly what the WWE, now owned by TKO, a publicly traded division of Endeavor, or whatever any number of initials they are these days, do you know what it's at now? Again, the film, we'll say, came out in 2000, almost $1 billion then. What are we looking at these days?
A lot more. So if we said like 49%, 51 in the merger, because it's TKO now. TKO in total is worth like 39 billion according to Google today. And I don't know if you took a shot and said, I don't know, 40% of that is WWE, maybe?
I think that's more than conservative, yeah.
Then, like, divide that by, like, or multiply that by, we're doing on the air math as usual.
Love it.
40% is like 15 billion. And with the other assets they put in TKO, maybe that gets down, but not much lower than that. I mean, it's multiple times, like a dozen times more valuable than it was in 1999.
Yeah, so that's a pretty substantial increase in 25 years. A cool 15 billion. But again, who knows what almost $1 billion is? So there's a lot of wiggle room in there. It's safe to say some people got a pretty penny back on their investment.
Almost $1 billion sounds right, because we would be able to look that up. Almost $1 billion sounds right based on.
And this is right before they go public as well.
The IPO value, the offered stock at 173 million, a lot less than $1 billion probably, but hundreds of millions, sure.
Yeah, safe to say again, the puking gimmick did not tank the company. I got to get a score out of you, as is the case here on the show. We score 5 categories. Plot is up first.
Is there a plot? I guess there's a bunch of different stories going on.
That is a fair question. The movie has a runtime with a beginning and the middle of an end. That didn't sound like a direct critique, but I feel like it's a fair one, because a lot of these stories do just kind of feel wrapped up. Even the Mick Foley story, which comes in a bit later in the kind of almost in the third act, kind of wraps up in a way that is really unfortunate. The Terry
Funk does retire
for about 7 minutes, and but he does retire briefly. Like we do find out at the end, unfortunately, that Jake doesn't continue to speak to his daughter, or hasn't had connection with her since the movie's release. or when they would have got the edit together. The stories get wrapped up very quickly and maybe not in the most satisfying way.
So 1 to 10, I guess 7. There's an interesting plot. There's a good plot with Foley, with Terry Funk.
That brings us to characters and performances. We've touched on already a handful of people who are focused on in this film. I'm going to run through a handful of names. I will let you follow up with, again, some thoughts on whoever you'd like. We've got Vince McMahon, a very brief cameo by Jim Bell, who compares the WWF to the Muppets, which I loved. I felt like maybe the only thing worth mentioning. But we do have a young Draws. We have Roland Alexander, who I actually once had a brief conversation with, believe it or not. Terry Funk, who we mentioned, Paul Heyman, China. New Jack is probably another person. And I think that kind of rounds out the list of...
Dennis Stamp? Because I'm not involved.
I'm not on the show, Terry. Terry Funk is having his retirement mass, is asking you to come, Brandon Thurston. Are you saying no if you're not booked?
I'm not booked because he's seen all these old guys, and like not them out of wrestling. Like I cannot totally understand this. Like because he's explaining to Terry Funk why he won't go to the show unless he's booked, because I've seen all these old guys, who are just walking around like old dogs, just hoping that somebody would recognize. He's like, and I think there's so many things in life that are, comparable to that. I think Dennis Stamp is maybe he should have been nominated for some awards for this.
And let's point out how beautiful a juxtaposition it is to see him arguing this really, firm pride of, hey, I'm not on the show. It'll make me look bad. This is only minutes after jumping on a trampoline in his underwear. That, no problem. No old dogs on that trampoline. I don't want to dedicate a lot of time to Mr. Stamp. Some of the other characters maybe that stand out.
Jake, I think, is, tremendously memorable. I think Roland Alexander as a character is an interesting guy. Foley's wife as like a normal person who's probably did not envision that she would end up, marrying a wrestler who would jump, be thrown off cages and get hit in the head 10 times with a chair.
I'm curious, what were your thoughts on the New Jack story? Because New Jack is a really interesting character in professional wrestling lore and the history. He's a guy who's just sort of really prided himself on being authentic in a business that is absolutely show. And that kind of prevented him from ever really getting to the big leagues. And he's got a couple of really unfortunate stories associated with him about where he's just hurt people, very blatantly tried to hurt them. But in this movie, he is presented as like the next Cuba Gooding Jr.
I don't see him as Denzel, but Denzel's buddy. Yeah, Denzel's friend.
As he's then getting in the elevator, it's closing. He goes, "I could be the next Denzel."
The voiceover is all Barry Blaustein, the director, and he's saying he's surprised at how much he bonded with New Jack. He said, "None of my friends had any justifiable homicides,
let alone 4."
Yeah, I think New Jack is another guy who's like such an awesome promo, like Jake was, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised he didn't end up in more movies where he was, Denzel's buddy or something. I think New Jack is, in general, and in this film, a really fascinating character. He claims to have killed 4 people. Yeah, you look no further than the Eric Coulis incident for his willingness to be violent. But I think he's. I remember watching ECW promos as a younger kid, and whatever time ECW would come on through the regional sports network, and yeah, that was a different world than I was used to seeing.
It's a really interesting showcase of him, and like you said, we have covered and talked about a lot of these characters already. So I'm curious. 1 out of 10, what would you give the cast?
Maybe a 10 for the characters and performances. Vince doing his classic. He's gonna like that. I wonder if he does that if a film crew is not there. Coaxing Draws to puke. It is Vince. I don't know.
I think there is going to be someday, probably long after Vince is dead, a phenomenal film about Vince McMahon. I wish Martin Scorsese was 30 years younger so he could eventually make that movie. We're going to talk about visual storytelling next, and there's a note that I made that I want to bring up because there's just this really quick interview with Al Snow. And what's notable to me, and the reason I bring it up, under visual storytelling is it's in the locker room, and you can see a couple performers like X-Pac changing and walking in and out behind him, and it's only maybe 45 seconds, but all he's talking about is how when he came in and he talked to Vince, Vince was talking about how he's going to be a big star and a main eventer, and as far as Al was concerned, none of that happened. And I bring it up again here under visual storytelling because watching this performer talk about his boss this way in the locker room of the company, that again, Al didn't lose his job because of that. He would go on to still be with the company for many, many years. I don't know, there's like a hopelessness there that I saw that came for me for the first time really watching and go, wow, this isn't just someone complaining about their boss. They're at work being filmed complaining about their boss in a feature film that the boss is absolutely going to see.
I don't know. Is that like an extra or something? I don't remember that.
It's pretty brief at the beginning. It's, if I recall, it's when the APW guys are going and you're just sort of getting introduced to kind of the behind the scenes crew. It might even be a little bit before that because it's I remember it specifically being a part of like a handful of people, or actually I think it's more of the introduction to Vince because it's people. It's when, is it Afa or Rasika? It's one of the two are talking about not getting time off for one of their kids being born. So as a part of that, there were like two or three just quick little sound bites from different wrestlers.
This was at a WF show. I think you would not see that today. I think everybody is, especially in Vince's later years, at least. I think Vince became, to my impression, a larger than life character who you seldom got access to, maybe compared to prior years, and he was in this other realm as opposed to decades before.
There really was a lot of kind of ironic juxtapositioning of images. Another one was Dave Meltzer early on saying something to the effect of, anyone who trusts Vince should think twice. And then it cuts to Draws signing his deal, shaking Vince's hand and then calling his mom and going, Bob, you're going to be proud. I'm going to be known as Puke. There's all these little moments like that where just somebody says something that I mentioned earlier, we think he could be Denzel's buddy. And then you cut to the elevator of poor New Jack saying, I could be the next Denzel. And it's just this constant, like I said, juxtapositioning of things that create sort of a very ironic sense. I don't know. I'm just curious. Was there any part of that resonated with you when you watched it this last time?
I guess what I said earlier about there's that crossfade scene where they're talking to Jake as he's sort of like slouching further and further down onto the bed in the hotel room, and like he's talking about all these different things and all this stuff where he said, I don't feel bad for myself while saying all these things that sort of makes him sound like he feels bad for himself. Yeah. That's one. I don't know if there are others. There are some close-ups of huge gashes on
yes,
on Mick Foley's head.
The movie does open with a little bit of use of sort of recreation footage of Barry Blaustein, who's the filmmaker, as sort of a kid and watching. Still holds up and is a fun kind of way of pulling the audience in. And you touched on it earlier a little bit, but the most emotional visual storytelling of the film, which was watching Noel and Dewey cry at the Royal Rumble event. And then moreover, watching Mick Foley watch that. And there's just a shot of him watching the footage, but you can hear them crying from the playback. And I don't know, that just is never not powerful watching it. It's really tough to watch that, especially Mick realizing this almost like shame that he's feeling. And he literally says, like, I feel like I'm a bad dad now.
You can actually hear the crying on the TV at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of a moment, but you're just watching Mick and his wife is sitting there, sort of reacting to the chair shots, even though he's not reacting to anything except, just the kids crying. And yeah, you hear him.
I don't know if I have other examples of visual storytelling that come to mind. Like 7 here?
My keyboard is stuck. But that brings us to use of sound. There's a few songs in this. Come on, baby, let the good times roll. Seems to be mainly associated with Mick Foley. It's almost like his Darth Vader theme that kind of follows him around. There's another track, it's escaping me now, but it's sort of more of a popular song that plays, but again, only used once. But for the most part, it's again, just kind of tonal music. I think what's more important in talking about use of sound, again, is just quotes from this movie. Because let's face it, that's what we've got a ton of. We've already mentioned a few. Terry Funk saying "forever" 1,000 times is just a standout to me. Obviously, Vince's "he's gonna puke" promo is great. There's one from Vince that I'll bring up in a second, but again, I just want to give you the floor to shout out any other notable quotes from Beyond the Mat.
The soundtrack, by the way, there's "Stand by Me" in there. There's "I'll
Oh
Be Seeing
yes,
You." I do remember hearing "Stand by Me," but I
I'll be
forget where
seeing
it's
you.
put in there. "I'll Be Seeing You," I think is in Funk's retirement. No, I'm not booked. The fuck is that chocolate? We make movies.
That's so there's
You have to be a dick in this business, because if you're not, the wrestlers, their egos are such that they will walk all over you.
And how beautiful is it that Roland Alexander, which might look like the human equivalent, and I say this with nothing but respect to the late Roland Alexander, he kind of looks like a melting Snickers bar, and he is just giving everyone shit about their looks. It's just this really beautiful kind of thing that he just says, you got to watch your labels. You got to make sure you read the labels. I don't think he's ever read a label from more than 5 feet away.
So you're ready to put a deposit, $500 deposit? We have a saying here: if you don't pay, you don't play.
I did have the good fortune of talking. I've never talked to Paul Heyman. I've never talked to Vince McMahon, but I did for about 15 minutes once talk to Roland Alexander.
Yeah, Heyman's another one in here where I think this is a good encapsulation of how Paul Heyman missed his calling as a cult leader, or maybe he was leading a cult, in fact, in the 90s. It's a good encapsulation in terms of him. They're showing him, directing the promos being shot in the basement for ECW, and this really inspiring speech that he gives to everybody as Barely Legal is about to start, which, like, being on indie shows, like, there's always there's not a speech of that level happening, but there's always like quick locker room meeting. They give you the sort of the rundown, the do's and the don'ts of the promotion, and then maybe somebody will give you a pep talk. But
Sure.
but he gives one of the great pre-show locker room pep talks of all time in that film.
One more quote I want to run by you because I had never caught this before this time is the last thing Vince McMahon says in the film, and it is eerily, it's just eerie. Let me put it that way, but he is with D-Generation X in the locker room and he's getting them revved up for a promo. And this is Barry Blaustein's voiceover is over it. So it's just, you just get a glimpse of it, but this Vince is very excited and it pulls the guys together and he goes, and give her a golden shower. Like a bucket of ice water hit me. I was like, whoa, what a weird thing to hear, especially after all of the allegations and things that came out a few years ago for this weird little soundbite in this super iconic wrestling documentary that I had never noticed before, and it's right at the end, and I was like, whoa, that is unsettling. Did you hear that? Am I crazy?
Yes, I did catch that, and I think the Draws moment is reflective of, if you take the Grant lawsuit allegations as there's some truth to them, if you accept that. Here's a guy who has a real obsession with controlling people, and you can see how that was something that he was able to practice in his working life, which he legendarily, worked really hard at, and he was the CEO. And he got to tell people what to do in a really creative way. He had to, spend a lot of time doing that. And there was clearly a sophomoric, humor to all of this. And you can see how that could get out of hand. And I think you can see how he really enjoyed sort of like being the elder frat boy in a frat house who had to make the new kids do stuff. And I think that's sort of exactly what's happening with Draws in that moment. You can see how that could become bad. Quickly to describe, like, he's having this meeting with Draws where, like, basically he has him sign a contract, right. And then he says, oh, there's one more thing I need you to do before you go, and he pulls out like the plastic trash can and puts it on the desk, like totally unnecessary. But
and again, because Draws, this performer, has this ability to apparently just vomit on command, and Vince wants to see it in person and wants to make sure that he does it before he goes. And while Draws is trying to vomit, Vince is just being ridiculous.
He's having the time of his life.
It's actual insanity. It's actual captured insanity. And when you talk about, Vince not wanting commercials for this to run during Raw, not surprised at all. Because, yeah, I mean, How do you not see this and just be
I
completely?
think that's the last thing he cared about. Like him, messaging somebody and force him to puke. That's all good, great fun to him. But like seeing Foley get smashed in the head in front of his kids who are freaking out, I think that concerned him. Jake Roberts do it in his bed, yeah, and maybe other things too that maybe made the business look less than great.
No, I totally agree. Well, let me ask you then. Use of sound, 1 out of 10. We talked a lot about the quotes there, so again, more
Quotes account for this.
quotes count, baby. Yeah.
Um, Maybe a 10 then, because it's an extremely quotable movie.
That brings us to themes. I noted a handful of themes in this. Barry Blaustein points out very early on in his voiceover that spectacle is what pro wrestling is sort of all about. He identifies that. Obviously, this movie contains a lot of tragedy, contains a lot of passion and struggle. And um, also, I noted delusion because I do think there's just all kinds of delusion on display. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way as much as I just mean that in a very, I don't know, objective way. Whether we're talking about our favorite trampoline gentleman, Dennis Stamp. What is it? Because he says my last match was 91. We've got to assume this is maybe 97.
It's his retirement show, so I think that's 97.
Yeah, because Brett's still in the WWF at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's been at least 6 years since he's wrestled. He's 50.
But you got to jump on the trampoline because you never know when the next booking's coming.
You never know when the phone's going to ring. So from that delusion to, again, like we talked about with Vince or even Paul Heyman being these sort of cult leaders, with a little too much control, what were some other themes that maybe stood out to you or really resonated with you?
One theme to take away from this is just how corrosive the wrestling business can be. Like, is it worth it to... There's some good things about wrestling, and I think it has its place as a form of art and entertainment. It's a form of entertainment. It's clearly cost Jake Roberts a lot. He blames the business for drug addiction, and all. You had to take this drug to wake up, and this drug to go to do the match, and this drug to go to sleep. It costs. And Foley's worried about continuing to wrestle too long because he'll start to have cognitive problems from all the damage he's gone through. I don't know. Like it is a spectacular, entertaining, and amusing business, but it's really cost a lot of people a lot of things. And I think there's very little accountability in it, so that I think there's where are the deterrents with the lack of accountability for the bad things that happen in wrestling. It takes a lot. It takes a long time for progress to be made, for things to improve.
I think anybody who sort of had the pleasure of growing up over the last few decades, you've really had to come to terms in all sorts of forms of entertainment with maybe some of your heroes not being the people you thought they were. And when you grow up loving something like professional wrestling, unfortunately, that's a really sobering part of growing with it, whether you're in the business or even if because of pieces like Beyond the Mat, you don't have to be in the business to be able to get these peek behinds and see just how just brutal, truly brutal it is as an industry. And in movies like this, I do think cause you to pause and ask, wait, why are we doing this? Or why at the very least are we doing it this way? Yeah, to just write off everything is okay because it's for entertainment. I think there's a too slippery of a scapegoat in there. And all of that said, 1 out of 10, what would you give the theme?
An 8 or a 9. Let's go.
An 8.5 is acceptable.
I can do halves here.
You can do
8.5.
An 8.5. We call that the Foley score here, the 8.5.
I've seen that movie.
Well, that gives us a total score then, because you gave the plot a 7, the characters and performances a 10, the visual storytelling a 7, the use of sound a 10. Shout out to our favorite Mr. Stamp. And then you gave the themes an 8.5 for a total of 85. Here on Real Talk, that's an A. You have the ability to adjust that.
That's an A. Sure. Yeah.
Lock in an A. As I, kind of teased earlier, I gave to your 7, the plot, a 7. Characters and performances, I gave it a 90 or 10, only because, again, as I noted, I do feel like some people are definitely working us, although there are plenty of people who are not. So 9 out of 10. Visual storytelling, I actually gave it a 10 to your 7. The reason I gave it such high points is I spent a lot of my early career working in documentaries. So much of the art of making a documentary is finding things. You're capturing moments. And I did really appreciate this time, just these moments they were able to capture that truly just visually kind of tell a story unto themselves. So I gave it a 10 out of 10, especially because it does contain images that really did kind of affect, in many ways, sort of the game. As we said, Vince wouldn't even let this run during Raw. So 10 out of 10 for me on visual storytelling. Use of sound, to your 10, I gave it a 9. And then for theme, I always say on the show here, if a movie is an example of what it's talking about, it's hard for me to not give it a 10 out of 10. And I think that, like we said earlier, Beyond the Mat is a very accurate portrait of what professional wrestling looked like at this time. So I gave it a 10 out of 10 to your 8.5. So that was a total of 90 to your 85. I also gave it an A. So we're right there on that one. Thank you so much for coming in today and talking about a wrestling classic.
Yeah, I think it speaks to wrestling at the time, and wrestling as recently as I knew it. I mean, some of it is maybe how extra matches were done at the time that aren't done today. There's some differences, but I think it speaks very truly to what the inside of the business was like, with, while highlighting some of the most memorable characters.
I'm so glad that you were able to come to the jungle again. I know it was a bit of a hike, but I couldn't imagine a better person to have spoke about Beyond the Mat with. I'm curious, would you ever come back? Maybe make the trip again, watch another picture with us?
Yeah, let me know.
Can I put you on the spot? What are a couple of maybe your favorite films? Maybe a couple of your favorite filmmakers? This is like an inside scoop. I don't know if anybody gets this kind of.
No, they don't. Some of my favorites. So, Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, what a great call.
Sling Blade.
Wow, I love it.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh man, anybody who names this many.
My girlfriend won't watch it with me. She says it's too boring.
Well, I'm gonna refrain from cutting a heel promo on your girlfriend. That's probably not a good way to do this.
Taxi Driver, Deer Hunter, to go in a completely different direction. I liked Wall-E at the time.
Okay, that is a very different direction, but another classic. These are great picks. See, I had you on just for your wrestling knowledge, but you've gone and validated a whole
So I had like a phase in my very early 20s, right in the DVD Netflix, the male Netflix era, where I was like, whoa, I have access to the entire film world.
Yeah.
And so I went through a lot of acclaimed films. Yeah.
Everybody should check out Brandon's work at WrestleNomics. If you're here on YouTube, you could check them out. We will have all of their links in our description. Also go over to Patreon and give them a subscribe there. As again, even if you're not watching the product day to day, I think the financial side of the business is always maybe the most interesting part of it. Again, I'm editorializing there, but I'm a big.
If you're not watching the product day to day, you're right there with me.
Exactly, you're in it with all of us. Regardless, thank you so much, Brandon. Can't wait to have you back. And until next time, again, read your labels.
Platinum Plastic isn't just a proud sponsor of Real Talk, they're also the home for all our new designs and merchandise. Follow Platinum Plastic on Redbubble to see all our A+ gear. That's Platinum Plastic on Redbubble for all your Real Talk merch.
2023's The Iron Claw isn't a movie about a wrestling move, nor is it even a movie about wrestling. The title refers to the hand of a delusional monster who used a grip of manipulation to imprison his surviving children in a cult of the family business. Look no further than the uninspired in-ring scenes for proof that The Iron Claw isn't a movie for a wrestling fan. The tragic story of the very real Von Erich family plays like an A24 Hallmark movie made for lovers of reality TV. Outside the ring, the slow pace and natural look aids the picture's tone, but unfortunately that tone is a sad dedication to parents who use their children as disposable vessels to vicariously live through. Perhaps a better name would be The Irony Claw, as a family that makes a living off selling emotions is taught that Behind the curtain, you don't emote, and you certainly don't acknowledge pain. The Iron Claw's better examples of subtlety seem to be in benefit of the budget and not the storytelling, while there are plenty of opportunities for subtlety in dialogue that leaves little to the imagination. This movie had an extraordinarily small budget considering the number of characters and scope it needed to cover, so I take issue more with those funding the story than those bringing it to life, and as a lion who has trained in professional wrestling, I genuinely understand the dedication required from the cast. By the time the credits rolled, I was left with the same question I had going in: why tell this story? But then again, as a cub who grew up on pro wrestling in the South, WCCW's Von Erich family curse was one I was all too familiar with going into the film, so I had to call in Lila the Sugar Glider for a big set of fresh eyes. So Lila, how many pull-ups did you bang out before you flew in?
I attempted to get to 10, and then I broke down hysterically crying remembering this film as I could not finish that through. Oh my God. Hi, Al. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for working out until you wept. That's all I ask.
The only way I know how to work out.
Today's episode, we're talking about different wrestling movies. I've been involved in and outside the pro wrestling sphere for a few decades now, believe it or not. And as such, have a lot of friends who are in the business. On today's episode, we have the wonderful stat guy Greg from Peter Rosenberg's Cheap Heat podcast. And we also have from WrestleNomics, Brandon Thurston, who's going to be breaking down Beyond the Mat. But I wanted to make sure at least one of the discussions we had today was maybe from a perspective of somebody who isn't
That's very little. So my relationship with pro wrestling pre-Iron Claw watch was my dad and his best friends used to love watching it when I was a kid. I have a visceral memory of, and I really hope my memory isn't like deceiving me or betraying me right now, but there was a character wrestler named, I swear to God, I hope this is true, Cat in the Hat. Is that true?
I don't remember a wrestler named Cat in the Hat, but I want you to continue to tell this. I think I'm going to figure out who the Cat in the Hat is. In the comment section, maybe.
He was this big beefy guy. It was like, I remember it was one of those rare instances where my dad let me like not go to bed at my bedtime. Like he was like, fine, if you want to stay up for a little bit longer, like you can watch this. And then this beefy guy named Cat in the Hat came out and they were hysterically laughing. So it was like a core memory for me. And then fast forward about, I don't know, 31 years later, my husband got tickets to WrestleMania here in my jungle abode of Philadelphia, and they were at the Lincoln Field. And I remember I was supposed to work that day. Oh God, I hope I don't get in trouble saying this. I called out because I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna miss seeing WrestleMania. I have to see it." And like,
Is that why you couldn't review Transformers, Lila?
I had to take myself out of that. I want to be a fair player in this game. But we went to WrestleMania. It was like so I told myself I was going to get really into it because I was so pumped from the energy of it. I completely underestimated the lore and length it takes to understand like what is currently going on. I tried finding podcasts. I tried finding highlight things to just let me know what happened this week in wrestling. And there was so much like you honestly, I felt like anyone that was going into it for the first time in their 30s, you had to like go all in or nothing. And I just could not commit to 3 separate days of the week of like 2.5 hours of wrestling. I couldn't do it. But for myself, this was the year that The Rock got like unveiled as like the new heel, blew the roof off. I remember I chose that time to go to the merch table to buy my shirt because I knew no one was going to be online. And by the time I got back to my seat within 3 minutes, The Rock still had it like he was still walking the catwalk. Like it was perfect. It was perfect. So that I'm a very, very casual fan. I appreciate the all around scope of what it takes to put on a show. If it wasn't for my dear lion of a pal here, pretty much suplexing me to watch this film, I don't know in what like I'd have to be going through something really sad to be like, I need something to match my sad because Jesus Christ, this was such a sad watch. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that in my open that this is not really a movie for wrestling fans, and what I mean by that is I think and wrestling fans of maybe a certain age, because if you are familiar with the story, I couldn't in good conscience recommend that anybody watch the movie, because I guess I would only recommend the movie to somebody who was interested in the story, because I do feel like it
Yeah.
did a fairly faithful adaptation. I mean, there's plenty of documentaries out there covering it, from the Vice Dark Side of the Ring series, I believe, has a Von Erich episode. The WWE put out a documentary maybe 15 years ago on it. So you do kind of scratch your head going into it, going, why this wrestling story? Because it does require a lot of crossover in terms of licensing and various things. It's not like, oh, this is just obscure enough story. There's a character in the film, Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody is famously never really had a run in a big promotion, so he's a character in lore of pop culture that I could see a movie being made about, because it would, again, just from a licensing standpoint, might be easier to do. Unfortunately, the Cat in the Hat did not get shouted out in the Iron Claw.
So disappointing.
I don't know. So I'll give you the floor to talk about the plot.
I'm going to try something different this episode. I'm going to start with my score.
We'll call it the soft number. What's the soft number that we start with the plot?
Okay, for plot, I want to say that my soft number, it's an 8. God, so much happens to this fucking family. So much happens to them. And I also found, I do the thing after watching a biopic where I look up how accurate was this, da 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 da. And one of the things I found out was that there was another brother who was not in this adaptation or in this. So it wasn't 5, including like the baby. 6. There's so many sons. It's so insane. It's like, I hear it's tragic, so I'm like, all right, someone's gonna go. Don't know who it's gonna be. And I wrote, is there a reason Mike isn't in the poster? Sad face. So I was like, it's gotta be him. So when David passed away first, I literally wrote an arrow next to it and said red herring. So I was like, nah, they were trying to make me think that it's Mike, but it was really David. And all of what attributed to everyone's death, besides, I don't know, Chris, and then the firstborn was Jack Jr., if I remember correctly. Jack Jr. was obviously like a teeny tiny baby, don't know what happened, but without knowing what happened to Chris, all of their deaths were somewhat intertwined with this family business. I don't want to say that the father's hand had a direct play in it, but was certainly a huge part in every which way that David felt like he had to put it all out there. Tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and like what comes from it. And what it feels like the overarching question is like what's going to become of the business as each of these brothers keep leaving. And how both the parents, both of them deal with it in their own separate ways, seemingly on the same page for the first few. And then as the deaths keep going on, like it just chasm is forming and wedging and breaking them in two separate places. Yes, linearly, they're telling like how the business is and the family is getting more and more destroyed after each passing.
Yeah. No, I definitely see what you're saying, that the wedge between the parents, there is no real wedge at the beginning, but by the end of the film, that's definitely kind of the punishment, if you will, that
Yeah.
Fritz, the father, is sort of left with. This idea that all of his sons have, unfortunately, are no longer with us, and the one that is has sort of started his own family and is sort of free of the business. And even though his wife, Fritz's wife, has not left him, she is as distant as one can be, as she's sort of just completely kind of ignoring him. I will agree with you that I think the plot is, well, I think it's one of the stronger points of the film. I'm not putting those words in your mouth, but in terms of the score, I think that's really fair. I have the 8 locked in. Obviously, one of the big selling points of this picture are the characters and the performances. You know, if you are a wrestling fan, you're probably more interested in the characters than maybe the cast. But if you're not a wrestling fan, I would imagine the cast is probably something that draws people into this. I'll ask you right out of the gate, Lila, in terms of characters and performances, we can lock in a soft number if you like, but I gotta, of course, know what you thought of Mr. Zac Efron in the lead as Kevin.
Of course. So, my soft number is a 9. Everyone played the character well enough that I fully believe that this is who they were. I can't go into characters and performances without absolutely wanting to hug Zac Efron. All things aside, I am a glider of a certain age and may have grown up with this face as a young preteen into my 30s. He's, I think, only like a year or two older than me, so I always thought there was the chance. And then obviously I've seen his performances and his choices change throughout his career. And I haven't seen other Zac Efron projects like in a while, so this is one of my first time seeing him since. Seeing his physique in this movie definitely made me blush and fan a bit. Jesus, I mean, besides the haircut, I mean, again, his performance made me want to like hold him and hug him. He brought me to the most amount of tears between that and the sunset heaven that the brothers find themselves in. Oh my God, I'm welling up again. This role that Zach or that Kevin plays in this family, in this portrayal of this family, it's almost like he's the oldest sibling currently. He had an older brother who passed when he was really, really young. So he's this almost pseudo big brother. He's a pseudo first sibling because he is currently, but he isn't really.
Right.
And there's something to like firstborn syndrome of like always wanting to take care of people that I relate very closely with, that like Kevin, Von Erich, the amount of what he had to endure from his father, from just like visibly seeing that it wasn't even on the spectrum of like preferred for his father, that like he gets slammed into the concrete floor and that's like, and still gets up and that's like not enough. Then his next shot at going for it, he nearly kills Ric Flair with the Iron Claw. Is that what I perceived?
All of the stuff with Ric Flair, I might as well just say now, and I don't want to hijack your point, but I thought that particular performance, which comes in about 6 minutes past the 90-minute mark of this movie, for me, it brought the movie to a grinding halt. Ric Flair is one of probably the 5 most impersonated wrestlers of all time. The performance is terrible. I don't mind saying, and I don't say that as wrestling fan. I say that is a person acknowledging the actor. It is a bad performance. It is a bad impression. I don't think it is the actor's fault because I can't imagine why they would sabotage the performance. I think they're very clearly not capable of giving it. There's a physique and a look I'll give the person credit for that they embody. But I thought the wig was bad. I mean, he couldn't even get the woo right, for goodness sake. And I mean, Ric Flair talks in the same way all the Von Erichs have this Texas accent. Ric Flair is known for his twangy North Carolina accent. This guy doesn't even attempt to go for it. So that's a side rant. I just had to get out of the way.
Get out of there.
But the match that his really bad promo that he does is meant to get us hyped for, yeah, the way that's handled in the movie is very confusing. I mean, if you are a fan of pro wrestling and you're not familiar with the history and how that match went and what that meant, that you would be extremely confused as to what was going on. Whereas in the way it's presented in the scene, the promoter, i.e. Fritz, Kevin's father, is apparently confused about the finish, implying that Kevin went rogue, and which is just, none of that is true. Like, none of that is remotely true. And to the point, even like you said, you were a little bit confused about Ric Flair's head bleeding. Ric Flair would have done something called gigging or getting color or cutting himself well before that would have happened in the match. So even in the match, it wouldn't have been presented like the claw cut his head, but the way it's edited in the film, I don't at all. I totally see why you would think, oh, he went rogue and grabbed this guy by the head and they had to stop the show. But then right there after, the Ric Flair character is super happy about it, whereas the other brothers aren't. And that's, again, where this movie really starts to fall apart with me, is after the 90-minute mark. I just don't think it knows what it wants to be. I don't think it knows how to end it. I think the fact
Yeah.
that they are staying so true up until that point to real life events, and then they just kind of get lost in the sauce. It was
Yeah.
it was really difficult for me. I was really
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't say I was enjoying the film. I was appreciating the performances. It's rare I see a movie where there is such a standout bad performance. And
Yeah.
unfortunately for Iron Claw, and this isn't hyperbole, it contains one of the worst performances I have ever seen in any movie. I really, really appreciate the cast performances in this movie, with the exception of one I mentioned. I do think the characters, other than Fritz and Kevin, are also maybe a little bit light. They lean very heavily, I think, on people just sort of knowing going in who these people are. I would imagine if you're not a wrestling fan, everybody just seems kind of one dimensional. So
Yeah.
the performances, high marks for me. The characters, I not so much.
No, that's a really good distinction, but I absolutely agree that everyone outside of Zach and Holt is very much like is very light work.
Well, I'm gonna give a shout out to Mike Von Erich, who I thought was, again, a really phenomenal performance. Somebody who does have a lot of range and is very tortured. He definitely has to sort of emote more than anybody, but also has a lot of subtlety. He plays sort of the runt of the Kevin, or the runt of the Von Erich litter. What the film does really well is using the Mike Von Erich character as this, like, when you insert him into a scene, we see different shades from the other boys, because all the other boys are very similar, but he's different, but they support him. And so you do get this sort of sense of family through the ensemble, but only through the ensemble, as just parts of the whole, as fingers on the claw. They don't really have much going on, but when they come together, there is a dynamic that you can really appreciate. Are we locking in a 9 for characters and performances, Lila? What do you think?
I think I was very starry-eyed for Zach's performance, that I'm giving it a 9, that I would actually like to give it an 8, because he can't be the only one. And to also, to his credit, like, Holt plays a very scary dad. Like, that
Yeah.
opening shot of looking up at him and he's just beating the shit out of me as I'm watching him do it, like, already sets the floor for what kind of man we're dealing with. So Holt has a very, very magical way of portraying a very scary man. I was scared of him the entire time. So I would say that, like, Zach Holt and Mr. Simons was definitely the most developed, but I don't know if it's enough to give it a 9. I think I have to change to an 8.
And that's 2 8s in a row. Brings us to visual storytelling. This had a $15 million budget, which, depending on
That's it?
that's it, $15 million budget. $15 million, you can do a lot with it, but when you're talking about a movie that has to fill the Sportatorium, has to recreate the Dallas Sportatorium, has to do these big crowd shots and bring in, again, a big ensemble cast playing recognizable characters. $15 million does not seem like the right amount of money for this movie. And there's other movies that you could point to that have 2, 3, 4 times the amount of budget and aren't attempting to tell anything close to this. I do have issues with the visual storytelling in the movie, and I mean, genuinely, I think 2/3 of the way through, I referenced the budget and I was like, oh, okay, I see why this is. So I thought the way the in-ring action shot was really sterile. I didn't think it enhanced the match. I didn't think it enhanced what it felt like to be in a match. I didn't feel like it enhanced what it felt like to sit in the crowd and watch a match. It felt like I really feel bad saying it, but it kind of felt like a film school approach to blocking how you would shoot something like this. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't dramatic, at least for me. And I'm not expecting them to do Raging Bull. I'm not expecting them to recreate Monday Night Raw, but every wrestling scene I watched, I thought it was so boring. And it wasn't because of the wrestling, it wasn't because of the hard hitting. And this is why I feel bad because I know these guys were actually taking bumps. I can't imagine how many takes they were doing. So they were probably beating the hell out of each other. But I don't know. I feel like it didn't even attempt to capture or peel back the curtain of what the art of professional wrestling is, nor did it attempt to enhance the experience of watching it, participating in it. There are moments we do see later in the film where Kevin, who's very upset, is just sort of running the ropes and it's one shot. And I did really appreciate that. But that visual language was used a lot throughout the earlier thing where you have these longer shots, again, framing that seems like it's trying to hide the fact there's not a crowd, but isn't bringing us close enough into the action.
So that's so interesting because I feel like this was actually a higher rank for me, like something that like I damn near want to give it a 10, but I'm giving it a 9. So I think a lot of the visual storytelling that really like grasped me again was more towards telling the story of these people. So I felt like that was a really strong visual storytelling point that really stuck with me. There's this one shot of the three brothers, David, Kevin, and Kerry, where they're all three of them are like sitting like after a fight and they're hunched over in the bench and like the we're exposed the cross dissolve of all three of them kind of just floating the same, they're all in the same headspace, they all feel the same burden, they're all in on it together.
Kind of all interchangeable at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
At that point, the lighting is the same. Like they all look really similar to like where the light is and everything. So it tells us that they're all in the same headspace. And I felt that that was really strong. I think the last thing is like the Iron Claw itself, that it is this grip that Fritz has had on the entire family, really. I mean, like you could see, I'm sure that there were moments where Doris wanted to break down and cry as well. And you kind of think that like the mother would get a free pass at crying for one of her sons, two of her sons, three of her sons passing away. And like you could still see her like holding it in. So he's clearly like commanded, an iron fist or an iron claw. Like he's raised this house in an iron claw where everyone cannot cannot be free from it until they pass or they've experienced enough grief.
That is definitely the point of the movie, that Fritz is the Iron Claw and he's sort of, yeah, forcing his whatever if you want to refer to as a lack of emotional intelligence, but really what it is, it's just a fear. It's a fear of change,
Yeah.
fear of growth, and he sort of forces his family to not only fit inside of that, but then to take on the burden. He uses guilt,
Yeah.
this weapon,
Yeah.
to whip up his boys all the time and being upset with each other to try to win
Yeah.
over. And it is yeah, the visual storytelling in the film is very strong. And I don't want to make it seem that my criticism means that it doesn't have strong moments, because I want to make it clear, outside of
Yeah.
I think this is a really good looking film. I think there's a lot of great uses of visual storytelling. I do think they handle things well, and the film in some ways is a victim of its own success, because like I said, what it's doing so well outside of the ring, it doesn't do it all inside of the ring.
I will dock it to 9 because you're absolutely right. There is something to being a victim of its own success, that it put in so much to everything else except a very major component, which is that they are not just a family that lives on a ranch that, goes on dates to boat. Like, they are also a huge part of the wrestling scene. That probably could have been done better.
But we're talking about use of sound now. I'm curious, Lila, what were your thoughts on the use of sound? Because we do have in-ring wrestling as well as, a time period soundtrack.
The song soundtracks of it were painted the picture beautifully. These were songs that I grew up from my father just making me listen to this stuff, and now it holds a very special place for me. So there's a bit of a bias with the song choices that they use, but I did feel the summer heat. I did feel the, the energy pumping. Like I felt very like summertime watching this for sure. So the songs put me into that. But one of my bigger gripes, to bring it back to the slam in the concrete, where you're having me sit as an audience member, I'm all the way in the back, or like I'm being a stickler, or I don't know, maybe I've just gotten used to some Hollywood magic and stuff, but I felt like when I felt the moment coming that he was going to be, I was waiting to recoil just based off the sound of back and head hitting a slab of concrete. And it didn't feel that impactful. It felt kind of soft. It certainly sounded like they were on a mat. It certainly sounded like it wasn't like I was like, for that moment I was ready to recoil and actually like scream, and I actually like was like,
Not so bad.
oh, that's not so bad. But you couldn't have thrown in a really hard hit so that I could feel that even more. I don't know.
We'll move on. Are we locking in an 8 then, Lila, for sound?
I think I want to bump it down to a 7.
Well, that brings us to what we call in the pro wrestling business the go home spot. We got which is discussing theme in this particular instance. I noted some themes, an addiction to family. I noted, and that came from me noting addiction and family as separate themes. And then I realized, wait, an addiction to family is actually what I think this movie kind of gets into from a couple different perspectives. The consequences of emotional ignorance and pain, I think, is a theme that is well explored, and sort of patriarchy over balance. We see that inside of the family. That clearly Doris and the boys are all holding up more than their end of the bargain of keeping the Von Erich family afloat, but for some reason they all answer to Fritz.
I think one of them that I felt was sort of not sort of, one of the heaviest themes I felt was generational trauma, and how, ironically for us, Al, you one of the most recent films you gave me to watch was Little Women, about a story about sisterhood, and how this is almost the antithesis. In Little Women, one of them passes away, and Iron Claw, one of them lives. Like, it is almost the antithesis in every way, shape, or form, except the love that they have for each other. It's the generational trauma of this addiction to family. I actually called my brother after this film and just told him that I loved him, because it really like struck me that if ever a day came that I wasn't a sister anymore, I think I would be inconsolable. I'm just gonna say, I think honestly it accomplished that for me, and it's a 10.
We got the 10 locked in for theme. Lila, that means we've got all your scores locked in. You gave the plot an 8, the characters and performances an 8, the visual storytelling a 9, the use of sound a 7, and the theme a 10. That gives us an 84. That's an A in our book. Do we want to lock in an A?
I want to lock in an A. I think A, right in the middle of its scale, is perfect.
To your 8, I gave the plot a 7. The characters and performances, I gave a 6.5. I don't mind saying almost completely, because that fucking albatross playing Ric Flair, you remove that performance, this movie gets better. You cut
Wow.
20 minutes out of the movie for everything from the claw to the confusing scene after. This movie gets better for me. So unfortunately, everybody did a great job, but seriously, one of the worst things I've ever seen. Visual storytelling, to your 9, I gave it an 8. Again, I did think it was really strong, but I had to dock some points for the in-ring business. Then the use of sound, to your 7, I gave it a 6. Not much explanation needed there. And then for theme, I gave it an 8 to your 10. I just knock it a little bit because I think it does explore the themes really well, but I do walk away going, what is the point? It does seem a little, I don't want to say gratuitous, but maybe a little exploitive, because like I said, there doesn't seem to be a message behind the film other than this really bad stuff happened, come look. So
Yeah.
give it a 71 to your 84. To me, it's
My.
give it a B minus. You know, I don't think it's a bad movie by any stretch. I didn't enjoy the movie, I don't mind saying, but technically I think it is obviously very well made. I do kind of wonder what this movie would have looked like if it were made by another group of filmmakers who maybe, not saying they needed to get in the ring, but maybe had a different relationship with the business. But we'll never know. Regardless,
Yeah.
I think it's a good picture.
But Al, I do have to say, I think there is something that we can take away from this, and that is that if you ever have any little cubs of any type, if I have any little gliders of any type, let's let them forge their own path. It is a story of Jesus Christ. Talk to your kids and let them forge their own path. That was my big takeaway, that I was like, wow, if I ever got a chance, I will let them choose their path.
And look, I've got to remind you did a great job of showing the context of, you're a sugar glider who has siblings, and I love that you called your brother after this. I am a lion who was an only cub, an only child, and I do watch movies like this, and I do have a very strong emotional reaction, recognizing that I missed out on a part of the human experience. And I got this before on the show, but when I was only 2, my father did take his life, and there were some things that happened afterwards, where he was actually about half a year later came back, and he had a little bit of a run, as they would say in the wrestling business, before he took off. So I do watch, movies like this, and it really does drive home a real deep sense of appreciation and family that I've never personally experienced. But I do appreciate that the power of cinema does let lions like myself, who have had a background like I've had, really truly feel and experience things, just inside of a couple hours that I've never experienced in life. And this movie did do that. I do see and feel parts of the family experience while watching this movie that I've not experienced in real life. So,
Al, I would not choose you to be any other way than you are
oh,
at this present time. Um, like truly, what a pal, what a friend. I wouldn't change anything
well, thank you.
in terms of you and who you are and how you have your joy to be mine.
Well, thank you, Lila. Right back at you. I really mean that. And look, as somebody, like I said, as a lion who doesn't really have a big family, I feel very fortunate to have my pals who I consider family. So hopefully you and I never have to get in the ring as a tag team or any other opposition. But
I'll be toast. I'll be toast. That concrete, you'll hear the sound of that concrete. There's no way.
I think you could have a pretty great like top rope finishing move though with your
I
gliding
they
ability. You could like
Oh, I have wings, man. You're right.
let us know in the comments what Al and Lila's finishing moves could be called or would be known.
Oh my God.
Uh,
So dope.
but as always, Lila, thank you so much for coming through, for gliding in and watching another movie. If I guess next time, since we covered family sisters, now we got family brothers. I guess next we either need to do robots or maybe again an only child.
Yeah, can you give me a fucking comedy or something? Jesus Christ. Like,
I know Lila gets saddled with like a tour, very like heavy. Yeah, next up,
funny.
Requiem for a Dream. We'll get Lila next.
Oh my God.
All that said, Lila, thank you so much for coming through. Until next time, don't drive drunk at night on your motorcycle, or you'll lose a foot.
Got it, pal. Only for you.
Before we jump into the next review, I just wanted to thank you for listening this far, and I ask that you leave a like if you're enjoying the show. And let us know what movies you'd like to hear us score on Real Talk. We're almost certainly on your favorite social media platform, so search Al the Movie Lion wherever you scroll.
If I had to describe professional wrestling in a word, brutal certainly comes to mind, and no word better describes Darren Aronofsky's 2008 film, The Wrestler. The movie is a gritty, full-color modern noir, complete with a femme fatale, anti-hero, and tragically beautiful storytelling about the theater of the human experience, and again, you could apply that description to the medium of pro wrestling. The Wrestler's plot is the final chapter of a fictitious character's run, but reinvigorated the careers of both Mickey Rourke and Marissa Tomei, who each devote and give more to their performances in this film than most actors do in their entire careers. The relationship between Randy and Pam is a chess game of love, and like both characters, the audience is always asking, who's working who? All powerful films are akin to a roller coaster of emotion, and The Wrestler is no different, sneaking in funny moments, but also brought this lion to tears multiple times with characters and performances so raw they feel like a staple gun to the chest. In carnival or pro wrestling speak, the term work is used to describe capturing your audience's imagination. So technically a movie is a work, and I genuinely believe that this film is the purest adaptation of pro wrestling to cinema we have. The Wrestler is an example of pro wrestling as much as anything you'll see on a Monday night. Even the film seems to leave a minority asking, did he die? But The Wrestler isn't about the death of Randy the Ram, it's about the last time he lived. I popped huge when SGG himself answered the call. I'm so lucky to welcome to the jungle today Peter Rosenberg's tag team partner from Sheep Heat and the Hyde law firm, Mr. Greg Hyde. You remember everything we went over in the back, right, Greg?
Yes, I do. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I hope you're comfortable. It's a little balmy in here. I apologize. You know, it's always a little humid jungle, but there's a nice breeze. You'll see. I've got to ask you, because one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, not just because you're a dear friend of mine, and of course,
Not just we're gonna laugh through the whole episode.
it's guaranteed to be a hoot. You obviously are a little bit of a fan of pro wrestling. Is that fair to say? Is it
Yeah, that's fair to say.
You joined the Cheap Heat stable, the fraternity, and have been holding it down for some time, covering the world of pro wrestling. And if I can put you over in pro wrestling terminology, one of my favorite pundits, my friend. I've always appreciated your coverage, and selfishly, that's one of the reasons I wanted to get your coverage on The Wrestler, the movie.
Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that. I know, your listeners, cinephiles, I don't know how much appreciation they have for pro wrestling, and I am quite possibly, not that we're comparing and or ranking, even though pro wrestling is all about competition, probably the worst of the guests that you are going to have on when it comes to breaking down a movie and cinephilia. Is that a word? I don't even know. But if it's time to talk graps, though, I'm your guy. Wrestling and pro wrestling and sports and entertainment, the life and death themes and the blurred lines of reality that come with pro wrestling, I'm the guy to talk to.
This is why you and I are the perfect tag team. I'm here to hold it down for the cinema side of things. You're here to hold it down for the combat theater side of things, if you will. And because, Real Talk is all about perspectives. I gotta ask you though, when was the first time you saw The Wrestler? Did you see it in 2008? I would imagine it would have been on your radar.
I feel like it was required viewing for wrestling fans to see it in 2008. And if you didn't see it when it was in theaters, certainly when it was getting that Oscar buzz and Mickey Rourke was sort of at the forefront and like becoming a Hollywood darling, wrestling fans tapped into it. And then if you still didn't see it, he was involved in WrestleMania as Mickey Rourke, but everybody know, come on, wink, wink, nod, nod. It was Randy the Ram. He appeared with fellow wrestling legends. If at that point you hadn't seen The Wrestler, you, my friend, you're just not a wrestling fan. You're not a cinephile or a wrestling fan.
Obviously, Mickey Rourke, Marissa Tomei kind of come with very different resumes and very different audiences, which creates sort of a really interesting Venn diagram in and of itself before you even get to the topic of pro wrestling. But we break things down here on the show in 5 categories, almost like King Kong Bundy, the 5 count.
If you're a wrestling fan, you know that you need a 3 count to win the match, but King Kong Bundy was so dominant that he requested a 5 count.
So I could have worked in a Booker T reference there. Those are the 2.
5 times.
We're going to try to work it. It's a game in this one. I'm not encouraging, necessarily drinking. But if people want to do whatever, Greg, we got to work in as many wrestling references as we can. This is, again, a story about Randy the Ram, a fictitious character, sort of your all-in-one big 80s star, had a big match that everyone would have known him for, and is now in the mid to late aughts and is working sort of the independent circuit, not making a lot of money, may or may not, given what week of the month it is, he might be living in or out of his van, but clearly very passionate about what he does. And in the movie, very much, I feel like, is ultimately a love story. But right out of the gate, what do you think about the plot, especially coming from the lens of somebody who knows pro wrestling so well? Did it feel authentic?
It absolutely did feel authentic. And it's like, when the movie was released, there were a lot of people on the forums and wrestling fans talking about trying to decipher who is quote unquote the wrestler, who's the real Randy the Ram. And quite honestly, there are so many people that fit that mold. Could have easily been the story of a Hulk Hogan or a Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Jake the Snake Roberts. This is so many people's stories in terms of wrestling has become their life. The one thing that they never did fall out of love with, the one thing that they were actually committed to.
And it's so similar to, all other forms of entertainment in that way. But the difference is, again, just the brutality of it. If you have a big run in one decade as an actor, sure, you might be known for the rest of your life if you were in 2 or 3 seasons of a successful TV show. But, if you get called back in to do a cameo 2 or 3 decades later, no one's probably throwing you through a flaming table as a result. A lot of the movie, we go backstage, we see inside the locker room. You yourself, as a professional wrestling pundit, have gone backstage. Does it feel representative of the experience you've had backstage at shows?
Well, I'm not a wrestler, so my experience backstage would be very different. Those are protected spaces. We describe wrestling as a performance, so the crowd only gets but so much. The scenes that I saw, it did depict what I would imagine it to be like, that level of camaraderie. These are people, they're trusting them with their bodies. And, at the end of the movie, there's a big question mark, as you alluded to. Did he live? Did he die? We don't know. But yeah, he's trusting people. These are people that trust in their opponents with their life. Just to take a step away from the movie for a bit, we've seen wrestlers on many occasions, something goes wrong and then their life changes in an instant. Bones broken, some never return to the ring. That level of camaraderie backstage that you saw in the movie, I imagine it to be like that in real life.
I as a lion, as the mascot for a production company, you make a lot of friends in the entertainment business. I'm lucky enough to have some friends who are very successful in the professional wrestling space, one of whom I was on the phone with yesterday, who just participated in a really big show over the weekend. And he was in a 6-person tag team match, probably wrestled for, I'm saying this very conservatively, maybe 3 minutes or less throughout the entire match, going in and out. And the list of injuries, no joke. The guy, I know people who've been in car accidents and walked away in better shape. And,
Right.
and it wasn't this really dramatic thing. Again, he wasn't getting thrown off a ladder. It was just 1 or 2 little mistakes. One of the guys turned around too quickly and elbowed him and it dislocated his jaw a little bit. One of the other guys, when he was down, backed up and just stepped on his thigh. So now he has a deep thigh bruise. Really little mistakes. It's not like anyone was angry. It just happens. But the consequences of these things that the audience would never, ever notice. It really is crazy how much the audience could never truly appreciate what these performers are going through. One of the big, I kind of mentioned that this is a love story. In Randy the Ram is sort of choosing, or has the choice he can make between the Marissa Tomei character, Cassidy, or AKA Pam, or he can sort of wrestle, and it's alluded to, it's very likely he will have a heart attack if he wrestles, and we're given all the clues to think that is what happened.
But see, you frame it as a love story, but the love story isn't really between, I don't think, the Ram and Pam. I think the love story is him and pro wrestling, because ultimately, as you see, when he's faced with that choice of Pam or the wrestling ring, he chooses the wrestling ring. He chooses his actual love. Whether he realizes it or not, Randy the Ram, he only knew as much of Pam as she allowed him to get to know. He chooses his actual love. I know I'm guessing, Al, that you were framing it as he's in love with Pam.
No, I genuinely,
his actual love is the wrestling ring.
It's a love story, and it's unique in the way that he gets to make a choice, and he does. I totally agree. It's either Pam or the Slam, and he chooses the Slam. He chooses the ring. Dying doing what you love is kind of the dream. And I think in a lot of ways, if Randy the Ram is an archetype of a pro wrestling experience, it's not necessarily my place to speculate, but I do have a feeling there are a lot of performers who probably imagined going out in the ring and that not being so bad, aside from traumatizing the audience, but just strictly from a selfish.
Wrestling is the only thing he loves unconditionally too in this movie, right? Like his daughter, he misses dinner and tries to make it up with a gift that might have been a gift for Pam that she didn't want, so it ends up going to his daughter. And when Pam rejects him, he has a wild night with another woman who is literally just a physical connection because he couldn't get that from Pam. So like everything else he loves with conditions, but wrestling was the only thing he loved unconditionally and was willing to sacrifice it all for.
I want to get into characters and performances, but first I got to get a grade out of you. 1 out of 10 for the plot. What do we give it? The old 10 count. You don't have to go from 1 to whatever. We'll just jump to whatever number you give it. But
I'm gonna give it a 8. I would have given it a 10 if we know what happened to him, but also it doesn't matter. Not that he doesn't matter. Shout out to Randy the Ram. He's a legend. He matters. But for the purposes of the movie, his fate, it doesn't matter because we watched him go through so much in that short time we were with him.
I can feel the comment section heating up. All the Randy the Ram fans are about to go off on SGG. And as much as I want to fan those flames for engagement purposes, I do have to let the listeners know you are wearing our Randy the Ram t-shirt, available right now on Platinum Plastic in our merch shop. The link is in the bio, so don't get too mad at Greg. He is rocking a Randy the Ram shirt, so you can
Randy the Ram coming off the top rope.
Looks great. Characters and performances are where we're at now. Could anybody else have played Randy the Ram?
No. Maybe somebody who, like, I feel like Mickey Rourke, he embodied it so perfectly.
Yeah.
That I almost can't say or see anybody else in that role. But, for the sake of discussion, maybe a Robert Downey Jr. might have committed to it. Maybe like a Daniel Day-Lewis, who he might have really committed to it, almost too much. Maybe like a Christian Bale. Those type of guys could have got into the character. But just in terms of, I just feel like Mickey Rourke, he embodied it so well.
There's just this authenticity that comes with the person that then impacts the performance. Because for those not familiar, Mickey Rourke did have a brief history as a combat fighter. After he had been a successful actor, he stepped away for a while and boxed. Yeah, so I mean, he has that kind of weathered look that I don't really think you can muster up in a makeup chair. He just lived, like, he just looks like a guy who's been through some shit, because he has. And I think that really aids the character. I don't want to peel back the curtain too much, but this lion may or may not, at several different points in his life, train pro wrestling in different pretty well-renowned places. The physicality in the bumps, but even the moment where he sort of slingshots. Randy the Ram is on the outside of the ring on the apron, slingshots in and whips his ankles over his opponent's shoulders, then throws his body weight around and twists into this sort of lucha style Hurricane Rana. That is so unbelievably impressive. I mean, I would be impressed if Zac Efron pulled something off like that. But in 2008, I mean, Mickey Rourke is still up there. This is an older gentleman, so performance is great. And he gigs, again, for those not familiar. That's when a wrestler, will cut themselves to bleed, and we watch him do this on camera. And I've got to believe there's no special effects there. So
that's the other thing. Like you mentioned, Mickey Rourke and the authenticity that he brings and the credibility that he brings to the character. Maybe he did just go full Mickey Rourke and do a blade job, which, as you explained, is he had that hidden razor blade in his wrist tape that he exposed just long enough to cut himself and bleed. I know when we were growing up, our parents probably would say, or maybe a uncle, a hating uncle, that would just say, it's fake. That's a ketchup packet. Oh no, Unc. That is real juice.
They call it getting color, and that's putting it lightly, as oftentimes the performers will, generally for somewhat safety precautions, will take blood thinners. So you get a lot more blood than someone normally would, even if they cut an area where they might bleed. It's, again, very, very dramatic, a performance art, to put it to the least. I want to ask you though about Marissa Tomei, her performance in this, because what's interesting, as much as this movie, it's The Wrestler. It's a deep dive into the world of wrestling. In a lot of ways, it's very much also a look at how the adult performer world is in many ways very similar to professional wrestling. It sort of leans on and exploits, and I don't even mean exploits in a negative way, I just mean in a very objective way, these sort of very human instincts. And Randy the Ram and Cassidy, kind of a yin yang to each other. Did you get that vibe?
I absolutely did. I mean, like we alluded to earlier, right? They existed in very similar planes, and his attachment to her was just like the wrestling fans' attachment to him. He was drawn to this character that she portrayed for a captive audience, and he was hooked. Her existence, it was the perfect way to sort of hold the mirror up to Randy the Ram, and just to show everybody just how easy it is. Because again, he's a wrestler. If anybody should be able to spot, the performance art, and to be able to draw that line and not get caught up in the blur, it's someone who does this every day for a living, capturing the hearts of millions. And yet he also falls victim to just, or maybe not victim, victim might not be the right word, but he also succumbs to,
He gets worked.
yeah, he does. He also succumbs to that blurring of the line between the fantasy and the reality. And he, to the point where he believes that she's his soulmate and she's his one true love. Even though we watch her reject him a few times, he still believes, because when you're good at what you do, that line gets blurred, and then the fantasy somehow it becomes the reality.
We don't know. We're getting worked. I didn't know what side she was on, but what ultimately makes the hero sort of virtuous in the end is that he ends up being right. There's plenty of instances where you're like, oh, she's doing her thing and he's a sucker, but in the end, she does come for him, and there is a level of potential love there. And again, we see what choice he makes, and maybe he makes that choice because she was working him so much earlier, and she sort of abused the trust, and it is that sort of magicians respecting magicians kind of a thing where it's like, you got me once, but you're not going to get me again.
Well, how about this, Al? Maybe he chooses wrestling because the fantasy doesn't exist anymore. He killed his fantasy. She's now with him, and it doesn't exist anymore. And there, you use the term magicians respect. There's no magic. He saw how human she was. Her light faded the same way his daughter got to see that this man that everybody loves and is on a pedestal is just a man, and her love and light for him also faded. And the same way that the fans who showed up at the show to watch him go on one last run, they see that his light faded. And that's what happened. He turned his back on Cassidy once she's stepped down from that pedestal, the same way it happened to him with his daughter once she realized that he's not on that pedestal, and the same way that the fans turned their back on him when they realized that he's not on that pedestal. It is the cycle, and she was a part of that cycle. And again, him choosing wrestling over her just shows that that's what happens when the reality actually overcomes the fantasy and people are able to be seen for what they were. He doesn't choose her.
The last thing I want to bring up when we're talking about characters and performances is Evan Rachel Wood as Stephanie. That is Randy the Ram's daughter. I don't necessarily have a relationship with my father, and so this movie was very emotional for me. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind saying, like, I wept like a little cub when I or when I watched the two of them have this moment, and it's really framed beautifully where there's this sort of beach behind them, but they're in this sort of concrete area, so there's just this sort of window that you see out, and it's just this really beautiful visual metaphor. But the rawness of Mickey Rourke's performance in this just unrelenting, again, brutal, just only how an angry child could speak to their parent. I don't know, that for me just took this movie to a completely different level.
His relationship with his daughter was part of the work. He was working her too. I hate to say it. Work obviously means, it's that sleight of hand. It's that performance that wrestlers put on to get a certain emotional response. She wasn't the priority. She became the priority when she became the thing that was going to feed his ego, right? When the amount of fans in the crowd started to dwindle down, when Cassidy wasn't really feeling his romantic advances, the one relationship that he knew that he could heal to feed his ego, which was by that point taking a beating, was the relationship with his daughter. And then, once he got that little bit of pep in his step again, she fell to the wayside.
But I would argue once he has the heart attack, that reality of I could go any day, I do think that does motivate just a level of guilt. Where you say ego, I saw it as almost like the most kind of pure selfishness of this sort of guilt that he felt for not being around, and he knew he might be gone. And so he was trying to like get his shit in, so to speak, at the end as a dad. But I do agree that I don't think he was being totally genuine. I think a lot of because he says the whole time he's, especially when he's opening up, he's saying, I know you hate me. I know you hate me. I'm a bad dad. Like he's very transparent about, that he's not fully there. So I agree with you on that front.
Okay, you say that you believe that he experienced some guilt, but what did he do to change? She gave him the opportunity to actually show that he changed, and he finds himself with the ring rat. He didn't necessarily burn the bridge that they were building, but he doesn't get anywhere near it.
And it's a very appropriate analogy to say burn the bridge, because that ring rat has a very strange obsession with firefighters that was maybe the funniest detail of this movie for really no reason. When Randy the Ram wakes up in this strange girl's room, it's just nothing but hunky firemen all over the place, and he's out of the house. I laughed very hard, and at that point of the movie, I needed a laugh. Characters and performances, Mr. Hyde, what are we giving it 1 out of 10?
10. It's a 10 just on the back of Mickey Rourke. He did so well and knocked it out of the park so far that, forget about the Oscars and the awards buzz. If a movie hits just the right somber notes, they're gonna be in the Oscar conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
But he opened the door to the world of pro wrestling, and he was welcomed in. His performance as a wrestler, and it resonated so deeply with the men and women who put on this same exact performance. It's a 10.
Let's move on to visual storytelling. In this movie, we really get introduced to not just independent pro wrestling, but like the tiers of independent pro wrestling. We start out on, I think, WXW, we find our way to CZW, and we end in Ring of Honor, the highest tier of sort of indie wrestling in 2008. And what a fun collection of cameos, by the way, while we're here. I could have brought this up in characters and performances, but this is almost more of the visual storytelling, because these guys aren't really characters in their movies. They just sort of say hi and move on. But I'm just going to name a few people. I saw Ron Killings, Nigel McGuinness, Claudio Castagnoli jumped out. Anybody I missed? D'Lo Brown, I think I saw at one point.
I do remember watching it and just thinking like, oh, he's actually in a locker room. Like these are not actors.
And of course, Ernest the Cat Miller plays the sort of
the Ayatollah.
Ayatollah, yes. So Ernest the Cat Miller as the Ayatollah, kind of an Iron Sheik. I tell you, if anyone was ever going to play the Iron Sheik, I don't know that we would ever cast Ernest the Cat Miller. It's like the stretch, but he does it.
That was one of the strengths of the movie. Like when he's going into these locker rooms, you have that shot like over the shoulder. It's almost like his point of view. For the audience, there's no separation between us and the world. We are now entering this world with him, and we almost become a part of it as well. And like, you see the bruises, they don't shy away from that. You see what the toll that it took on his body. Now when people think pro wrestling, it's on ESPN, it's on NBC. They think NBA All-Star Game type over the top high production value performance. But the world of pro wrestling that he was in, it was so far removed from that. They show it. They don't ever, I don't think they ever, there's not one scene where they try to dress it up and make it seem like he is not at the bottom. They let you know, in the beginning when they show the posters and the match cards, that he had his glory days, but by the time we see him, we do not get to experience that. We get to experience the tail end of the battle, and we see the toll that it took on him.
And what I'm so glad you brought up the opening montage that the opening credits roll over, because that juxtaposition of all these posters and cards and photos, and then it's just him in what looks like a preschool, and he's just beat up and he's in this chair, and it's that again, such beautiful, perfect cinematography, because in a frame, you're able to summarize everything you just saw, this amazing career. If you just cut it after the opening credits, you like, that guy was a king. And then you immediately see the present. And he's like, again, he's like a child. He's like a baby. He has no control of this world he was once a king in. And to see him in this literal like preschool kindergarten room, and he's just all banged up. I took a note of that right out of the gate, because I was like, oh, that's so beautiful.
You know, you've taken great care to make sure that Cassidy's story is told too. And I want to point out, not to circle back to this, beat a dead horse. You know, we don't do animal cruelty on Real Talk. Al, the movie lion,
Right.
is a big advocate of animal safety on movie sets and in the jungles and everywhere else. So we're not going to beat a dead horse with this. And I'm sorry I used that phrase twice. Al, I apologize. But to go back to the well of Cassidy and Randy the Ram really are two sides of the same coin. Her scenes in her performance space, the strip club, they very much mirror his scenes in the wrestling arenas and the gymnasiums where he's performing, in terms of the lighting and the grittiness and it's not sanitized, it's not glamorous at all. It's just a real reality that shatters the image that most people have of these worlds that these two people exist in.
One detail I want to point out that really stood out to me is the position of the camera with regards to those two characters. So you mentioned it earlier. A lot of times we're behind Randy the Ram. We're over his shoulder. We're sort of centered up. This is kind of a tropey shot. It's like a walkout shot. You see it all the time, boxing, MMA, pro wrestling from time to time. But it works really well because it's the performer's point of view. You have the light shining in your eyes. And that sort of keeps the hope and the fantasy alive through the whole movie. But Cassidy doesn't really get that. The camera is always looking at her. We're never behind her. And that really strips away, no pun intended, whatever sort of fantasy she gets to live. And obviously we're seeing her through Mickey Rourke's point of view. But to your point, they are mirrored in the same way, but that is a very distinct visual difference. We're often behind Randy, both in a story perspective, but also visually, but we're always just looking right at Cassidy for what she is. She can't really hide. She's exposed, and she just has to sort of perform through that.
Our perspective is the character's perspective. Cassidy, she has no fear of what's ahead.
Yeah.
She does not.
She embraces it.
She wants better for herself. She wants to live. She wants him to live. It's not our perspective, quote unquote. It's them. It's their perspective, and it's how they see themselves. She doesn't see herself from the rearview mirror. She's looking forward. And Randy, even with the music, right?
Yeah.
The wrestler's set in present day, and you only hear like 80s hair band rock songs because he has not let go in any capacity.
The next category is use of sound. So let's get a number for storytelling, because I love it. We're already there. I don't even have to segue. But 1 out of 10, use of sound, visual storytelling. What do you give it?
I feel like I'm biased with these high numbers, but I'm gonna go 8 again. I almost said 10, but I was like, Greg, rein it in.
It's a seasoned worker, ladies and gentlemen.
He knows 8 again.
He knows when to go hard and when to pull back. Use of sound in this movie, we're just talking about it. It's a very classic sort of like, hey, it's him in his heyday. I kind of wish Randy the Ram had a theme song. You know, that is something that every pro wrestler, especially from the 80s, you know, from Randy Savage to Hulk Hogan to Sergeant Slaughter, any wrestling fan, you say a character's name, they immediately think of the Ultimate Warrior running to the ring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, am I crazy? I think this movie could have really benefited from just sort of having some sort of theme or score.
I don't know that he needed a theme song necessarily. I think because that would have given him an identity. They tore away all that. They stripped away all that. So like, here's a guy who what we get is what he has, right? So that's not where they're trying to take us. They were showing us that like this guy again is so far removed from that I think a theme song would have given him too heroic, I guess, or like would have put him too close to the heyday and who he was.
No, that's really fair. I mean, I feel like maybe his theme music is music we recognize from the past because Randy the Ram isn't real, but by again connecting him with songs we recognize from the 80s, all of a sudden he feels that much more real and authentic. You go to a live wrestling show for the first time or your 200th time, a big part of that experience is the sound, is the noise. Bigger scale shows put microphones in the rings or under the ring. They put them in the turnbuckles. Did you feel like this movie captured that experience of feeling like, oh, I'm at a wrestling show right now?
Yes. Again, it was one of those things where like you you felt every chair shot, every body slam, you heard it. There was no inauthenticity, at least for me. It did feel like those shows, not necessarily a big production WWE show, but an independent wrestling show where anything can happen and these people are really going for it. It absolutely did feel like that.
But 1 out of 10, use of sound. What are you giving it?
I'm gonna go 7. It wouldn't be fair for me to go give it a whole 10 out of 10 in terms of without watching the movie more closely and keeping an ear out for that. But definitely the songs being dated to the 1980s, I think it was purposeful. And it it definitely shows you just the fact that Randy's trapped in a time and a place that he's not going to get back to.
Definitely some Arrested Development going on with Randy. That brings us to our final category of theme. But before I talked about the theme, I want to know, Greg Hyde, if you're on an indie show, you're going home, what's your finishing move? Is this established?
I would have to go with a jackknife power, or maybe not the jackknife, the last ride, the elevated power bomb. Yeah, I would have to do that.
I love
that. Feels like one of the most dominant finishing moves, power bomb.
You can't beat that. I mean, look, I'm not taking that bump, SGG. I just officially pulled off the card, but I had to know. I had to, give the listeners a little bit of breaking news here. If you were booking a Peter Rosenberg finish and he was going over, what finishing move would you give Pretty Peter Rosenberg? Babyface Pretty Peter Rosenberg.
I feel like a stunner.
Stunner or like RKO cutter? Is it like more of an old school gritty like?
No, definitely stunner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, that's established.
Gotta go stunner.
Love it. All right, last ride in the stunner. You've heard it here, folks. You've heard it here first, folks. So that brings us to theme. That means this is the go home segment, if you will. I isolated a couple themes that really stood out to me, and those were themes of loneliness, respect, sacrifice, true love, and fate.
Loneliness, for sure, I think, is the overarching theme because he absolutely is alone, and that just further enhances the juxtaposition between that fantasy and that reality, right? The blurred line of like people remember him a certain way and they remember him at the top of his game, but he really, when the bell rings, that life that he has to go back to, he is alone.
I think the life of any artist is a very lonely one. Or not even just artist, any passionate person. If you are absorbed by your work, if you're absorbed by a lifestyle that's built around, again, what you truly do in your work, it is very lonely. And I think this movie is an example of that. But it's, again, the way the movie ends, I feel like, I don't know, I don't see it necessarily as a negative. It's dark, but I think there is some peace to it. I think there's something really kind of profound about being able to go out on your own terms and go out doing what you love. I guess I got to ask you, 1 out of 10, what do you give it for theme?
Theme, I'm going to give it a 10. And, you touched on this a little bit when we were talking about finishing moves, right? Randy the Ram's finishing move was a diving headbutt. This film came out, or was released, I should say, after Chris Benoit passed away, whose finishing move was also a diving headbutt. And I don't know how intentional that was by Darren Aronofsky, just to show, the toll that this is all taking on Randy the Ram. but he's so methodical that I have to believe that it's connected, even if those dots weren't intentionally connected in any other way than my conspiracy tinfoil hat brain.
Chris Benoit passes away on June 24th, 2007, and The Wrestler is released in December 17th, 2004. So I don't think there's
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think it's any stretch at all. Or I, 2000, I'm so sorry, 2008. Yeah. Don't listen to me. My notes were not correct there. December 17th, if I'm not mistaken, 2008. But the year was 2008. So the point is, I think you're potentially onto something there. I think that's a really interesting point. As we said, Randy is this sort of archetype of all these different wrestlers, and when you're putting together a ram gimmick, obviously some sort of headbutt makes sense, but the flying headbutt, the Dynamite Kid, you just sort of, I don't know, he walked so Chris Benoit could run with diving. But yeah, contemporary wrestling fans would definitely associate that with it. I don't think you're out of line at all there for making that connection. In fact, I think that's really interesting. Is interesting.
Thank you, Al.
Yes, I'm here to validate you. I'm here to put you over, bro.
Appreciate that. Someone call me crazy for that.
No, hey, not here. You're talking to a lion, all right? So that's crazy enough. I can't call you crazy after this. All of that being said, you have a total score locked in. You gave the plot an 8, the characters and performances a 10, the visual storytelling an 8, the use of sound a 7, and the themes a 10. That gives us an 86, which on Real Talk is a solid A. Are you comfortable giving it an A? Do you want to give it an A plus, an A minus? You could give it a B if you wanted. It's your grade.
Oh no, A is about right. I think I absolutely am willing to go on an A on that.
I hope everybody listening can maybe jump in the comments and let us know what you got, because I want to know. These things are important, people. I gave the plot to your 8. I gave it a 10. I felt like this was really, again, kind of a perfect story of what it was trying to be. So yeah, I really, really appreciated it. I've seen this film a lot. I watched it again for this review, and I appreciate it a lot more than I have before. Characters and performances right there with you. I gave it a 10. Visual storytelling a 9 to your 8, so we're not far off. Use of sound, I felt like a bad guy. I gave it an 8 because Randy didn't have a theme song. You gave it a 7 and seemed to like it more than I did, so I don't even know what these mean anymore. But when it comes to theme, both gave it a 10. Real Talk listeners know that's a big deal on the show when I give something a 10, because for a movie to get a 10 out of 10 in theme, it means it has to be an example of what it's discussing. And like I said in my open, I will stand behind this. I think The Wrestler is an example of pro wrestling just as much as anything else that you'll watch, because it has all of the exact same elements that a pro wrestling show would have. It just happens to be a movie, and it's a really great movie. I gave it a 94 to your 86. For me, that was an A+. But what can I say? I'm a lion who loves movies and wrestling, so there might be a little bit of bias there. That's a pretty good grade. I think Darren, who I know is a big listener to the show, will probably be pretty happy with our scores there.
Yeah. He can't listen. Short. He didn't get the Oscar. If we had one of those, we can give it to him. We would. I thought he deserved it, but yeah, like you said, this is as strong a grade as we can get without that gold trophy that he really wants.
We'll do our best, Darren. I hear he likes pie, so maybe we can just give him some pie. Stag Guy Greg, I'm really genuinely so glad and touched that you came to the jungle today to hang out with me, to help me score this film. This was our wrestling episode. I had to have you come through. Will you come back another time to the jungle to maybe review another movie?
I absolutely will. And look, if we want to do another wrestling movie, the 80s made for video, direct to video classic Body Slam starring Roddy Piper. I mean, not to jump too far ahead, I would also give that a 10 on theme, just because it does represent the campy 80s wrestling that we all grew to love.
You're booking your own shots here. I love this, man. This is great. I usually have to twist.
Cinephiles don't want me to do that. We're not going to review Body Slam. We're not gonna do it. I just having fun with Al.
We'll see. Maybe I can threaten everybody. If we don't get 600,000 likes on this video, then that means we're reviewing Body Slam.
Right.
I'll do it. All right, well, I should probably stop threatening the audience. That's not a good way to end a review. But a great way to end a review is to remind everyone that they can check out Cheap Heat, which is a wonderful professional wrestling podcast and kind of a life podcast. Let's face it, you guys talk about all sorts of stuff on that show. Nothing's all. But one of the greatest casts of pro wrestling characters between Dipperstein, obviously yourself, Pretty Peter Rosenberg, and a whole host of other characters. So check out Cheap Heat wherever you get your podcasts. Stat Guy Greg, you can also check out pretty much on all social media platforms. Have you been blackballed by anybody that I don't know about? Or?
Not yet. I don't think that Elon and Trump will realize what I'm saying out there, so they don't, they haven't caught on to me yet.
Yeah, I'm too new, okay? Look, I'm aligned.
We're just talking movies, so, I think we're safe in this jungle.
No, thank you so much for coming. I'm so proud that I got to have you come on. And just look, if you're making any deli sandwiches and you get upset, just keep your hands away from the slicer, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and here's a look at the scoreboard from our show. Brandon Thurston scored Beyond the Mat an 85 in A, Tomei 90 in A with an 87.5 A average. Wyla scored The Iron Claw an 84 in A, Tomei 71 in B- with a 77.5 B+ average. Coming in highest on today's show, The Wrestler scored an 86 in A from Greg Hyde and an A+ and 94 from me with a 90 A average. Please tell me what you graded each film in the comments, as I genuinely want to know. A big thank you to Lila for swooping in once again. Support Brandon Thurston by subscribing to WrestleNomics on YouTube and Patreon, and go follow @Rosenberg Wrestling on YouTube to see SGG and the entire crew. Join us next time on episode 17, written about the screen. LA director Ocean Vashti-Jude debuts to score American Fiction. Jimmy the Toucan is back to grade Barton Fink, and my dear friend Matt Summerstein returns to review Adaptation. Thanks to the team at Real Digital for producing this episode, and Platinum Plastic, who supplies all our show's merchandise on redbubble.com. If you haven't left a like by now, you might as well, and subscribe to the channel, as well as hit the bell icon to be notified when Real Talk drops. Thanks for listening, and if you're going to talk movies, make sure it's Real Talk.
Amy, my wife says, do you really want to do it? I almost broke down and said, it's the main event. It's the main event. You think I'm not going to be in the main event? Thank you. I'd rather be in the main event than breathe.